Healthcare Act was pulled from the House floor on Friday. President Trump's first calls were to the Washington Post and the New York Times, bastions of so-called mainstream media. But on Saturday, we saw again how Trump's alternative realities are sometimes fed by conservative media. Check out what he tweeted bright and early on Saturday. He plugged Fox's primetime talk show Justice with Judge Jeanine. Even by Trump standards, a pretty, kind of blatant call to action. Watch Judge Jeanine on Fox News tonight at 9 o'clock. So what was Jeanine Pirro going to say? There was intrigue all day. Well, watch. Here is what she said.
My opening statement. Paul Ryan needs to step down as Speaker of the House.
Wow. Was this a premeditated attack? Trump and Pirro working together to undermine Ryan? Or was it a coincidence? Here's the more mundane explanation. Take a look. At the time Trump was posting his tweet, Fox had that countdown clock on screen. You can see it there. It actually been on all morning long, promoting Jeanine Pirro's show, saying there was going to be new information about Trump's wiretap claims. So maybe that's all this was. Trump seeing a countdown clock, having no idea Pirro was going to say what she said about Ryan. Let me bring in two great guests talking about this. CNN political commentator and radio talk show host on KABC, John Phillips, and CNN senior reporter for media and politics, Dylan Byers, both here with me in LA this morning. John, great to see you. Dylan, you've been writing about this conservative media relationship to the health care bill. Essentially, the Breitbarts of the world were the fiercest critics of the legislation, right?
Right. And what you see is the same thing that you're seeing take place in the House. You're seeing that take place in the media. So you have a Freedom Caucus who's willing to stare down the president, willing to appease its base, rather than get in line with the President of the United States on the healthcare legislation and very likely on future legislation. You're seeing the same thing with the right-wing media. I think we anticipated that a lot of those hardline conservative outlets that helped carry Trump into office were then going to be with him and have his back.
Right.
And in fact, what they're doing is they're sticking to the line, they're sticking to their values, they're coming at him from the right, while he's also getting pressure from the left. The pressure from the left doesn't seem to be nearly as aggressive as the pressure he's getting from the right. And what's really interesting about that, is that Fox News, which used to sort of be between mainstream media and the far right media, is now becoming an outlet that is actually one of Trump's greatest defenders, at least in prime time, because he's catching so much fire from the far right.
Now, a lot of the coverage on the Breitbarts of the world was against Paul Ryan, whether it was Drudge or right. Breitbart.
And that, by the way, is so much of Steve Bannon, who used to be the chairman of Breitbart News before he joined Trump's campaign and then Trump's White House. He has always had it out for Ryan. Hardline conservatives, far-right conservatives have always had it out for Paul Ryan. The strategy here is to use this failure, offload some of the responsibility from President Trump, put it squarely on Paul Ryan. Unfortunately for them, Trump is backing Ryan.
So what do you think of the Pirro exchange? What do you think that was yesterday?
That's confusion.
Just a coincidence?
I mean, that might just be a coincidence, but I think your point is right. We think there's some sort of collusion or conspiracy with Trump and Fox News, and the truth is, you're right. He's just watching. He's just responding. I mean, he's probably just responding to the news. He's seeing a countdown clock the same way any other viewer would see a countdown clock.
And hoping it would vindicate him.
The President of the United States.
Right. John, what have you heard from your listeners throughout the week? Having your radio program, also writing a column for the Orange County Register. Sure. Were you sensing this conservative backlash to the bill before what happened on Friday?
Well, part of why working in talk radio is so fun is because you're working in the complaint department of life. And whenever people don't like something, you hear about it right away. This bill was far from perfect. My listeners didn't like it. But I think that the conservative media made a fundamental mistake here. They think that if this thing was killed and if Trump lost, then the result would be that Paul Ryan would lose the speakership. And he's really the target here. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they fundamentally misunderstand who Donald Trump is and what he stands for. He's a hawk on the border, he's a hawk on crime, but outside of that, he's a pretty moderate Republican, and this was a moderate Republican bill. I don't think the result from him losing this battle is going to be that Ryan is going to lose his speakership. I think the result could be that he could look to build different coalitions, maybe with the Democrats, similar to what Arnold Schwarzenegger did in California, which was a complete disaster, and that could backfire in their faces and blow up like a hillbilly's rifle.
That's absolutely right. I would just tack onto that. Someone told Axios this morning that the government is controlled by 30 people, the House Freedom Caucus. I think if you're Trump, you are looking to different coalitions. It might be a pipe dream after all the antagonizing you've done of Democrats, to think that you can rope in Democrats on future legislation. And yet I think that is a strategy that the White House is seriously considering.
I don't think it can happen with Nancy Pelosi as the leader of the Democrats. But if the Democrats ever wise up and put someone competent in, then you could have really interesting coalitions built.
All right, so have you had to shift your on-air personality at all in the Trump years? Have you found that your audience wants something different from you now with President Trump in office?
No, I think people have always been able to separate the man from the policies and the man from the party. People understand that he is flamboyant, that he has a certain style of delivery, that sometimes he's going to say things that make you uncomfortable, but they're with him on the border. They're with him on crime and punishment. They're with him on the important things. And so I don't think that they're going to turn on him as the left is expecting.
And what did you make, what did both of you make of Trump calling up the Washington Post and New York Times right away, basically announcing that the bill had been pulled by calling Robert Costa at the Washington Post? What did that mean, Dylan?
The enemy, right? I mean, the dishonest, corrupt media that you can't trust, you can't believe a word they said. In his first major embarrassment as commander-in-chief, he calls Robert Costa the Washington Post. Then he hangs up the phone.
Costa almost didn't answer the phone because it was a blocked number, and he thought it was someone calling to complain.
This is a lesson to reporters. Always answer the blocked number call. Always, because it's probably the White House. And then he hangs up the phone and he calls Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. The New York Times, who he's suggested should be out of business. I mean, look, there is such an obvious discrepancy between what the president says and what he does and how he feels about the media. He loves the media. He lives in the media. Calling the Washington Post and the New York Times, it was reminiscent when he was going through divorces in New York and he would pick up the phone and call the New York Post and other New York tabloids. He lives in that world. The reason that media reporters such as ourselves have to keep repeating and highlighting this discrepancy is because his base doesn't get it. They don't understand it. And I would encourage people in his base to think about all that anti-media rhetoric and then look at those calls to the Washington Post and the New York Times and think about what that really says about the president.
John, is that true about his base?
I think Trump goes to where the love is. And I think that's why he went to the mainstream media. And he was getting killed by the conservative media all week.
Oh, that's interesting.
Interesting.
And if you go back to the primary campaign, he was very friendly with the mainstream media. He was on our pal Don Lemon show all the time. He was on Morning Joe all the time. He would call into all of the Sunday shows. So he's not a guy that necessarily hates the mainstream media. I think he knows how to use them to his advantage.
But there is, you must acknowledge that there is a discrepancy between that rhetoric that you see at his campaign rallies, where he's, naming New York Times reporters, Washington Post reporters by name as the enemy, and then he's going on those shows, calling those people. I just, for me, he's sending one message to the base, he's sending another message to the mainstream.
Well, he lives in a world of gray. I mean, no one is all evil or all good. So when they're useful to him, that's when you give him a call. And
it's fake news until it's real news. Right. John, great to see you. Dylan, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Right after this break, Time Magazine calling the President Trump, asking if President Trump can handle the truth. A fascinating interview with the president, with Michael Shearer, where the president said, hey, I must be doing something right because I'm president and you're not. We'll talk to the editor of Time right after this.